right. So thank you for coming. I'm Nate Mockler. I'm a data scientist at Biogen. I will do the presentation with Anuja Das, who cannot be here today, but the presentation is Why Can't I Print This? Adventures in Creating Interactive Safety Reports. So a bit of an introduction, data monitoring committee reports. They summarize safety data to external stakeholders to ensure trial safety and determine possible discontinuation. As during trial conduct, you will do a number of these, depending on enrollment and timelines. They generally were done in the past with large SAS-based PDFs. So basically, you'd have SAS programmers generate a PDF that would be sent to the DMC committee, and they would sort of review that way. There were some challenges with that as trials become longer and larger. You have possibly like 1,000-page PDF, and that can be challenging to cross-reference. Sometimes they didn't provide answers to questions. There was some back and forth that didn't come up with individual review. For example, if there's like an adverse event that happens to a patient and they want to kind of look at that patient's information, can be challenging with just one PDF. So there was a desire to make something a little more interactive, to reduce back and forth, and sort of move towards self-driven data review. I think that's sort of a common theme that has been talked about for a while. Sort of the high-level solution is to change this report to an interactive Markdown document that's rendered to an HTML. So it's going to be a combination of what I call static tables, just your general tables that are generated by GT summary, tplyr, other internal packages, and then what I call interactive elements. So those are sort of tables that have filters by using the crosstalk package, and then using GT, the data tables package, Plotly, or other HTML widgets. We didn't want to use shinies. The first question is usually, why don't we just make a Shiny app? And we didn't want to do that because we still wanted a discrete file. And the way I think of it is sort of like a guided exploration. Also, because these committees are very important, there's a lot of stakeholders. We kind of want to make changes gradually. So you're still getting a discrete file. You're still getting a lot of the tables you want. It's just a little different and hopefully a little bit easier to work through. So here's an example. So this is an HTML file. So you have sort of the sidebar here, and these are hyperlinks that are clicked to each table or figure listing, and then sort of the interactive elements at the bottom. You can see that it's sort of branded. You can kind of scroll through. And I think that is a lot easier to sort of go through than perhaps just one large PDF. Talk about some of the examples. So this is an example of like your static table. You've all seen them before. That's certainly still a part of this. They're still having table 1, table 2, table 3, etc. But what we added is sort of these interactive elements. So this is an example. This is taken from one of the DMCs. It's obviously fake data. This is the CDIS sample data. But you can see here that you have on the left here sort of your basic filters, and those use crosstalk, the crosstalk package. And that allows you to put the DT, this table right there. And so what you can do is, let's say there's a patient that you want to look at. You can quickly go through and pick that patient's information. Sort of basic filtering as the way I like to think of it. Not as comprehensive as a Shiny app, but enough to sort of have this guided exploration. Or I want to look at records where there's just sort of like a shift to high. Also with DT, you can do a lot of conditional formatting, a lot of filtering, all stuff to try to make it a much easier sort of data review. And that's really the goal, is to make it an easier data review, get through it faster, get through it, and really focus on the important stuff. So how did we do it? So you have your traditional sort of old system where you had SAS programs. You had your SAS programs, you had QC programs. They were usually double programmed. They would generate RTF files. You would take all those RTF files, and then you would knit them into a PDF using like Adobe Acrobat. And that was the system that was working. And one of the things is that there's like a workflow associated with that, with sort of like review. And we didn't want to completely throw that out. So how do we take sort of the Markdown file, and how do we integrate that into this workflow in a way that is minimally disruptive? And the way that we did it was that you still had your R programs, depending on on our program, you may have a QC or some kind of check. And what we did was we created RDS files. RDS is sort of like the core R object that you can always get out of a GT summary, DT, whatever. And what we did was we took those RDS files that like generally any you can always get out of an environment. And then with interactives, we had some test that code. We take that, we put those in the RDS files as well. And so the Markdown file only contains the RDS files. And so that allows all the individual components to go through their processes without affecting the Markdown file. So the Markdown file is that that you saw before is a very nice CSS file, and then sort of basically just table 1, read RDS, table 2, RDS, table 3, RDS. And we did that. And so it's easier to move things around. If there's parameterization, if we want to look at certain subgroups, it allows us to sort of have our external review process while having still all the benefits of the interactives. So to talk about what went well doing this process and generating these HTMLs, internal medical reviewers really love the data review possibilities. I think whenever you give someone the ability to sort of like drill down on their own, I think it's usually received pretty positively. I think there's a lot of positive feedback, mostly positive feedback from the DMC members as well. I think they were happy to have maybe a little bit easier review process, especially because DMCs can do a lot of trials at once, or a lot of it can be a lot to do. So to get through it quicker and more efficiently, I think was a big benefit. I think there was a big there's a big way to do reusability. I think when you have that, you have those RDS chunks, you can sort of move them around, and sort of we have internal table generating packages. And I think you can quickly generate these DMC files. Also accessibility, I think they're easier to read. I think if you have people who have some special needs, I think you definitely have the ability to do a lot more work with that HTML file as opposed to just one PDF. I think the CSS allows nice formatting and branding. I think that we started out using the RMD formats package, and then we eventually moved towards a custom CSS file. And I think that enforces sort of a consistent style throughout, and especially because you're using different packages to generate different outputs. One person might be using GT summary, one person might not. So you have the ability to consistent enforce standards, which I think makes it a much more easier read. A big thing, lowering the number of outputs. I think if you can take one interactive shift table like that, and you can take it, and so you can just break it up by subgroup, by lab, potentially by treatment, and create something that you can have like different tabs. I think that saves a lot of time because you only need to qualify it or validate it once, as opposed to maybe 5 outputs. And I think you can overall lower person time and person hours. And I think that's a big benefit, as well as you have more trials, you have resources are always a consideration. I think less back and forth. Interactive answer questions during review. I think we want to try to minimize the back and forth. I think you want to have the review, and that's it. All right, what didn't go so well? So I think so we did a roadshow, we showed everybody, and the first piece of feedback was, I don't like it, I can't print it. And that was a tough one to go through, because we didn't want, I know with Markdown, you can obviously render to PDF or RTF or anything, but we didn't want to do that. We wanted to try to have one sort of file that had everything in it, and sort of like, I can't print this, I want to print this, I can't print the interactives, was a challenge. And I think there was a lot of sort of work that had to be done to explain the benefits of this. And I think change management is a big problem. There's a lot of stakeholders. I think that's why we try to be as gradual as possible, as opposed to just like, here's a big change. But I think change management was a big issue. With DMCs, you're working with unblinded data, so there can be like a firewall, and many companies do it different ways. But if you're going to do that, you do have to unblind, and so you have possibly two environments. And that was a challenge. I think you have to be very careful, and I think we use REM files to try to, because back with SAS, it's just SAS. But with REM, you have to make sure that everyone is using the same lock file and that you're consistent about when everybody's working, everyone's sort of working in this with the same versions in the same environment. The interactors are great, but you do have some scope creep. And so scope creep is something that we do struggle with. So we want to make sure that, like, what are you benefiting with these interactors? What is your overall benefit? What are you saving? What are you gaining? And that's always a discussion. And then harder for us to see between like your standard and custom outputs. I think I think creating a custom CSS file was a big help with that, and sort of having like a one Biogen sort of standard format. I think it will be a big benefit moving forward. Sort of next steps. We're on Markdown now. We're going to move to Quarto. Also, we're going to do some slide generation. So the goal is to eventually have like the whole DMC presentation completely automated. So there's also presentations that need to go there. So you'll have sort of your HTML, but also a PPTX file associated with it that will have everything in there, but sort of broken down in that way. Automate outputs. You still have. Eventually, we don't even want to really like write the RMD file. So the shiny front end, pick what tables you want, pick your parameters, click report generation, I think is the goal. Sort of automate, speed up the process as much as possible. Same thing, standardize off-the-shelf DMC reports, want to try to get that as easy as possible, take your inputs, have these files already ready to go. A thing that's come up a lot in the past couple of days is Shiny Live. I think that would actually solve a lot of the questions that have come up here. Have a discrete file, a guided exploration in a web browser without having to like have a server set up. I think it would be a benefit, but I think there's a lot of questions associated with that as well. Want to acknowledge a lot of people worked on this project. And without that, we would not be where we are today. I think it's been a big success, and people have a major part of it. And that is it. So have 5 minutes, but there's time for questions if there are any. Is this user replacement? Yes, it is the replacement. It is a replacement of the PDF DMC report. So yeah, that's the goal, just not to send it anymore. And we did. We don't send it anymore. It was successful with that. Yeah, how do you share the HTML securely? That is done through like a secure FTP. Just like it was with the PDF. Same process, secure FTP. That's why another reason. Secure FTP, all security and stuff like that.